Free the land.
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 By any
means necessary.
Yeah, look, you know, this is one of the most important days in my life because it reflects upon so much of the history that I've had an opportunity to be close to. So I'm not going to, you shouldn't really ever ask me to come up and speak about this because I could be here for the rest of the year, but we're not going to do it. We're going to cut it, we're going to cut it, we're going to cut it short. I want to just mention, though, this is Black August. And in Black August, I wanted to mention that my father died in August. He died in 2001. He was a brave, beautiful brother. And unlike, like a lot of fathers of that age, he dedicated all his life to his 8 children and to his wife. And he's a shining example of what we talk about when we talk about black fatherhood. In fact, when me and my older brother became involved with the Republic of New Africa after I finished college in 1969, he later on, and then we started coming up with these different names, you know. But you know, to show you what kind of man he was, he went out and worked with us and struggled with us and tried to change things, and then he wound up changing his name to my older brother's name, right? Because my older brother was named after him originally anyway. So he changed his name to Arki Shakur. My wife was born, who is now deceased, was born August the 31st. And so this is also her month. This is her day. And so there are so many reasons why Black August are important to us. But to get to the point that I'm up here for, we should reflect back. 1970, 1969, 1970. In Mississippi, the civil rights movement had taken on a totally different form. The marching, the demonstrations, the overt exercises of struggle for freedom had somewhat been set aside. There were people struggling in various different arenas, like courthouses and things of that nature, like the, what we call the North Mississippi Legal Services and other legal services division, where brave young lawyers had gone in and began to try to fight for people's rights on an economic level and sometimes on a political level. There were people fighting for food programs, people working in the Delta to deal with the awesome poverty that had existed. But the visible expressions, the Meredith marches, and things of that nature had pretty much subsided. We had moved into a stage here in Mississippi in 1966 that we called the Black Power movement. No longer did we understand, and we understood it. It's awesome how people can understand. Black Power, you know, we give a brother Kwame Ture sometimes the credit for the term, but he'll tell you the term didn't come from him. The term came from the Delta, came from black folks. Because when they were marching from, I think it was from Oxford or from the University of Mississippi, coming toward Jackson, they went off into the black areas on that march. And it was the SNCC was trying to explain to people how they had to move the struggle just from a struggle for civil rights, which essentially was a struggle for only access, the opportunity to go to white schools, the opportunity to drink at white water fountains, the opportunity to sit in white restaurants. And they explained that we actually had to have power, because if we didn't have power, then we were always going to be preyed upon people, that we would never be able to function in the way and be free like we wanted to be free. And so black folks heard all that, and you know how black folks, they like to simplify the message, right? And so they did all that talking, and at the end of it, the people said, Black Power. And so that's when the movement moved into that phase of the Black Power movement. Black Power became the dedication of all the young movement people, the revolutionaries, the people who are fighting for change. And what we looked for was, how do we ultimately express black power? What is the real expression? Some people expressed it by community control. Some people expressed it by reclamation of the African repatriation movement, going back to Africa and helping Africa and doing all we could. Some people expressed it in talking about fundamental, basic, and total change on this continent that we call, in this place we call the United States. We call it the United States Empire, that's what we call it, right? You call it the United States of America, right? Okay. And so we were all talking about that. And in 1968, March of 1968, 500 black leaders came together from all over the United States. Betty Shabazz, Malcolm's widow. Queen Mother Audley Moore, if you don't know about her, you should learn more about her. Dara Boubakari participated from New Orleans. She was one of Queen Mother Moore's comrades who had fought against the lynching movement, lynchings back in past days. H. Rap Brown who got involved. All the cultural leaders in the cultural nationalist movement got involved. People like the creator of Kwanzaa, Karenga, Amir Baraka from Newark, who was a great writer, one of the greatest writers, and we don't even use his books in our English classrooms. Right? I mean, you know what? There is nobody to write like our people write. And yet we let people sell us books to use in our classrooms written by inadequate writers who don't even express anything that's in our soul. Right? But Mary was involved, and so many other people involved, and 500 folks came together. And they established what they called the Provisional Government of the Republic of Ireland. And they wrote up what they called the aims of the revolution, which was to create a new society. Now dig it, and guess what they said in Aims of Revolution? They said that black folks were entitled to everything that they should be entitled to because of what had happened to them in the past. So they were talking reparations, right? This was 1968, and they said that they were going to build a society where there would be no color discrimination. There would be no class discrimination. There would be no gender discrimination. Well, they were really talking out of turn, weren't they? Right? I mean, and they were talking about, and they would be identified as these radicals who hated people. Yet nowhere in there did it say anything about hate or about hating anybody or calling for hate. What it was saying is that you have failed so-called white forefathers, right? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, you people who owned slaves and have perpetuated slavery and white supremacy for so many years. So what is needed is for Africans here to have an individual, independent expression of government, self-government. This is what they say. And so what they did is they dedicated themselves again to the liberation of Africa as a continent and African people, but they dedicated themselves to the liberation of the Black Belt. The Black Belt, which is not a new thing because the slave rebels had that same intent. Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, Nat Turner, all of them were fighting for independence in terms of an independent state. And then we go on in the history and so much transpired. But this day of 1968 happened, and then the FBI, we found out later, something like in 1979, we got a hold of what we call the Counterintelligence Program papers, which is the secret program of the FBI. And we found out that at the very moment that the RNA was being established, the FBI had sent agents to Detroit, where it was established. And they had stated that they wanted to find any crime that they possibly could, no matter how minor, so they could turn that assemblage out, okay? So that they could crush the group. A year later, they actually tried to crush it. It was in 1969 at the New Bethel Church in Aretha Franklin's church. And they came in and they shot the church up and shot over 800 rounds in the church. Fortunately, none of our people got killed. Black legionnaires protecting their people shot back, and one officer was killed and one was wounded. And they had what they called the New Bethel trials in Detroit. It was a celebrated moment for Detroit, which really mobilized Detroit electorally, because there was one brave black judge named Crockett who stood up and said, "Why are you got these people in jail? They ain't did nothing." So he let them all go. And white folks said, "You got to go, fella. You can't do that here in Detroit." And so there was 30 judges in that court at that time, and only 2 of them were black. But when that judge stood up and they said they were going to impeach that judge, the white folks did, and black folks said, "Oh, no, we're going to impeach you," right? Okay. So they organized, and before the organization was over, many years later, several years later, that court had 30 judges, 25 of them were black, and 2 of them were white communists who said that they were dedicated to the black movement too. Okay? And so this is what they had in that court. It became the most efficient courtroom in the courthouse in the country. Most efficient, brilliant lawyers came out of that court. Milton Henry, who was a brother of Imari Obadeli, who we saw in the picture there. We actually saw Milton for a moment. But that happened, that was mobilization that occurred because of what happened with the Republic of New Africa. But the Republic of New Africa in 1970 and 1971 decided that they were going to move their official headquarters down to the south, first New Orleans and then to Jackson. And they were going to do that so that they could start the movement to inform people of their rights to a plebiscite, a vote, where people could express their will, whether they wanted to be subject to the racist government of Mississippi, or they wanted to be independent of that government, where they wanted to have an independent government. And they wanted to talk about reparations. And so all these brothers and sisters, mostly from Mississippi actually, but some from other places also came, and they began to do that form of organization. And the FBI decided they had to stop it. Now, Joe F. Collier, I believe that's the right name, had just been murdered up there in the Delta somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. I think I got the name right, I'm not sure. But we wouldn't, but you know, of course, the 2 black students had been murdered at Jackson State University, Gibbs and Green, in May of 1970. But in 1971, the Republic of New Africa decided to have a land celebration day because we had purchased land in the Bolton Edwards area, and we were going out there to celebrate the fact that we had land. And that news got out not only around Mississippi but around the world. And so white folks put it together like this. Excuse my language. Niggas come in here talking about they're going to build a nation and they're going to have a land celebration in Mississippi. Ain't going to happen. Okay, that's basically what they said. The governor said it ain't going to happen. The Attorney General said it wasn't going to happen. The Ku Klux Klan said it wasn't going to happen. And all these different, the mayor of Jackson said it wasn't going to happen. And so all of these people said it wasn't going to happen. And as we were actually literally riding to the land celebration in March of 1971, we started hearing that it wasn't going to happen, or that they were going to do something to us, and we did it. And so we came on anyway, all right? And so we arrived here, and I remember out there on Lynch Street, Lynch and Dalton. That corner has been famous for a lot of different things, but Lynch and Dalton Street. We gathered, and people were arriving, and the press came up, and they said, well, these folks said, they ain't serious. Y'all ain't going to have no land celebration here. And Brother Imari said, look, we come in for peace, but we come prepared. That's what he said, right? And we did come in peace, and we did come prepared. We did both, okay? And so over 500 of us, probably, about 500 of us driving in various different vehicles, and, you know, we had our prayer cloths with us, right? But we also had our instruments of protection with us. We wasn't going to be one of those people that got hit over the head with water hoses. That wasn't going to happen, not that day, not that day. We wasn't going to be beat up or riding bloody in the street. Not by ourselves, anyway, okay? And so what we said is that we meant it, we came in peace, and we came prepared. So on that weekend, we first went to a place called Mount Beulah, which was a little mission. And we stayed in Mount Beulah, and then while we were at Mount Beulah having our meeting, that was not the land we had purchased. The land was still a little ways away from Mount Beulah. We had to meet at Mount Beulah because the buildings had not been constructed on the land that we had purchased. So we met at Mount Beulah, and on Sunday we were going to do Land Celebration Day on the land. And while we're on Mount Beulah, the FBI, these folks who sometimes you cry crocodile tears for, okay? they started coming up into the land site, and they would come up and they would start taking pictures of license plates and the ways that they had harassed people. Because, see, these people later on would be investigated, they would be fired from their jobs, they would be evicted from their homes and things of that nature. And so they came up in there, and it so happened that I don't know how old I was, I had to count, but I think I was probably about 22, 23 or something like that. But Brother Imari and Brother Elijah had put me in charge of security. And so they came to me and they said, look, what did the FBI do coming up in here? And I said, I don't know why they come up in here. They said, well, they don't come up in here no more, right? Okay. So we got our little crew together and we made plans for them not to come up in there anymore. So we set up a security perimeter. And we started acting like they wasn't used to people acting, right? We said, this is ours, this weekend, right? So you don't come up in here. So the next time the FBI tried to ride up, they got stopped. They got stopped. There was a car blocking their path, and somebody called out on a bullhorn, get up against the car, okay? And then they thought about it, and then they got up against the car, right? And when they got up against the car, we told them, you can come anywhere, you will have to get on out of here, right? And all of the people who lived in Mount Buell at that time was in agreement with us. This was our territory for that day. So the FBI went limping away. They left. So the next day, we went to the land site. And we tried to find places to go where we could avoid any kind of conflict. We wasn't looking for any conflict. But our scouts kept coming back saying that now they done set up a roadblock here, now they done set up a roadblock here. So we said, we're going straight ahead. And we headed straight down the highway. At one point, Brother William Miller, who was a lawyer at that time in Mississippi, he was the son of a great doctor here called William Miller. And old William Miller, old Brother William was probably a little, he was probably a little nervous, Charles, okay? And so what he did is he had us go the wrong way by mistake, so we had to turn around. So with this big caravan, turn around on the road. And the FBI car got in the way, We didn't know why they got in the way. We thought they were trying to cause trouble. So we stopped the car. We stopped our cars, and we had already agreed that we were going to go along with anything legal, show license or whatever we had to do. And so I had to be the one to get out to talk to them. So I got out and I started walking up there to where the FBI was, and I was really looking for a hole to jump in, right? Because, see, here I was just walking out there. The people behind me were well prepared, and I assumed the people in front of me were well prepared. But, I was just a brother going into it to make the conversation. So when we got up there, and then I saw that they were all shaken up, really. They said, no, I didn't mean to get in the way. We're sorry, we didn't mean to get in the way. I said, well, get the hell out of the way then. You know how it is when you get braver once you see they got And so what they did is they got out of the way. But right down the road, they had set up a roadblock. The sheriff, old Goom Jones. Goom Jones was the same guy who had shot up the Jackson State students back in May. So he was a killer. He was a killer, no question about it. He had set up the roadblock, and he saw the FBI scampering out the way. That was I'm guessing he did. I don't really know if he did or not. And so we decided we'd keep going. We kept headed toward the roadblock, and we wasn't going to be stopped and set for something legal. So for just like the Red Sea, is it the Red Sea? I don't get my biblical reference. So that doggone roadblock open up. Okay, and open up.